When you walk into O'Brien's Wines, take confidence from the fact that every one of the wines you see on our shelves comes directly from a winemaker we know personally. We choose quality so you can choose what you like. Our exceptional wines start from less than €10. We'll see you in store or online at o'brienswine.ie. O'Brien's, only good choices. Please enjoy alcohol sensibly.
The Anton Savage Show on News Talk.
Brought to you by Standard Life. Retirement specialists getting you ready for your second life.
And with me is Jennifer Keane. She is founder of paygap.ie, which does exactly what it says on the tin. Monitors and advocates in respect of the gender pay gap. Something which we probably would have thought years, if not decades ago, was going to be a thing of the past, though it is not. As we stand now, Jennifer, the pay gap in Ireland, gender pay gap in Ireland, roughly how large is it?
So the CSO from 2022 says it's about 9.6, but my own data from what I've gathered from Irish companies that have been reporting since 2022 has us at about 11%.
Why is it there?
So many reasons. Have you got 3 hours? I mean, the pay gap itself, look, it's not that it's different from equal pay. It's not that you're necessarily paying men and women different money for the same job. Broadly speaking, it's a representation of the level of equity in your company. Is your company equal or not? Because the percentage is not that I'm being paid 6% less per se. The percentage is more, I have less of an opportunity over the length of my career to progress into those higher paid roles, to avail of bonus opportunities, promotion opportunities, that kind of thing. So that's
what's creating that inequality in terms of opportunity?
Oftentimes policies that people aren't really thinking of, opportunities to actually avail of opportunities. So, for example, one of the key areas where discrepancies show up is overtime. As a woman, are you actually able to avail of overtime, or do things like childcare, elder care, family responsibilities prevent you from availing of overtime and therefore impact your earnings overall?
But is that soluble by the employer?
How do you mean?
Well, as in, if I'm an employer and I say, okay, I have shift work here available and there is overtime that can be given to anybody who can work 5 to 8 in the evenings,
sure,
as a case in point. If the women are, by your description, less likely to take that overtime because they have childcare pressures, they have elder care pressures, how do I, as the employer, resolve that inequality?
Gotcha. There's some things, I mean, in the case of, for example, maybe opportunity to take overtime, that's not something you could always solve. But there are other things you can solve. I spoke at the Public Sector Women in Leadership Conference the other day, and there was a great example of a woman who had worked both for the PSNI and the Gardaí. When she was working for the PSNI, she wanted to work a 4-day week and ran up against a policy that said inspectors have to work 5 days. Why? No one could answer. It had just always been the rule. And therefore, she had to go on a big prolonged fight to be able to work 4 days. And there's lots of policies like that just are because they are. And they often then disadvantage people who need a bit more flexibility. And often the people who need that more flexibility are women.
The odd thing is, though, if that policy applied, she would further worsen the gender pay gap by taking it.
Potentially. But the flip side, I suppose, is if by taking that she's able to move up into a more senior role, her pay overall on average would then still be higher because she'd be in one of those more senior. But
do we not have
roles.
a problem where, I mean, let's say you take a rank, take chief superintendent. If you have chief superintendents, half of them male, half of them female. One of the issues is that statistically, the female members are more likely to opt for, I mean, just looking at Eurostat, they're more likely to opt for shorter working weeks or for part-time than the men. That means that even if they're at a similar rank, you have a gender pay gap.
Yes, and this is why I say, for example, say the overtime thing can't all be solved by companies. It has to be solved by government action and policy action as well, right? Because you need to look at the root cause. Why do women take more flexible working arrangements and whatnot? They do it because the burden of childcare, for example, falls disproportionately on women. We have the gap because it's still not mandatory to pay maternity leave, because parental leave is unpaid. All of these things that obviously disproportionately affect women, are things that tend to be unpaid. We want people to have children. You know, as a state, we need people to have children. We don't incentivize people to have children. It's very expensive for childcare. It's very expensive to have them, and you actively lose out in your career when you do.
And is that intrinsic sexism within families, that each family tends to make a choice where either rightly or wrongly the childcare falls on the female member of the family rather than the male? Or is it that policy economically incentivises that?
It's a little of everything. It's a lot of social kind of norms as well. You'll see in circumstances like even where it is maybe a stay-at-home father instead of a stay-at-home mother, people in the school will still tend to call the mother because that's just the default. That's kind of our societal expectation, is that the mother will stay at home with the children and the father will go on to work. But I think for most people, that's not the reality anymore. Most people, both parents do have to work. And in many cases, both parents are working full time. And it's quite a tough decision to decide who has to stay part time. And again, when you look at the reasons people decide that, often it's because the woman is earning less. And that's why she then goes to part time, which further reinforces that pay gap that has happened.
But how do you resolve something like that seems so baked into the society? I mean, the government can't mandate which parent a school secretary rings.
No, but you can look at countries where they have solved it, and it is things like, for example, having proper paternity leave, having paid parental leave, having equal amounts of leave when you have children, looking at things like boards and whether there are women on executive boards and in leadership roles, and looking at rules around that. There are ways to do it, and in countries where there is a very small pay gap or where there's effectively pay equity, that's how they've solved it. They've effectively legislated for things like that.
And who are the poster children for doing it well?
The likes of Luxembourg, Italy, people, places like Norway, etc., have quite low pay gaps, 2.2, or essentially pay equity 0. We're about in the lower third of the EU overall at 12.7. So there's some countries much better than us, some much worse.
Text saying the gender pay gap isn't just about unequal pay for the same job, which is illegal, but reflects deeper issues like women being concentrated in lower paid roles, underrepresented in senior positions, and facing career breaks for caregiving, leading to a difference in average pay across an organisation, highlighting systemic barriers and representation gaps rather than direct discrimination for work. There's an issue within that as well, which I assume is challenging, which is that thing of women being concentrated in lower paid roles. In some instances, that's lower paid roles within an industry. In others, it is within lower paid industries, which is a challenge as well.
Absolutely, yes. And what's been interesting is to look at different industries historically. For example, there is a phenomenon, a well-studied phenomenon, where a role has predominantly been female and men enter that role and take over, the salaries get better. The salaries get better. You see that in, for example, in computer science, which used to historically be very female dominated, is now male dominated. There's a huge pay gap and women are not incentivized to go into it. And a good example of this as well, more current, is local government. In county and city councils, which do tend to be lower paid and part-time, most of the city and county councils have pay gaps in favour of women. When you look then at our TDs, which is often a stepping stone, local council to TD, we see that women don't make that jump. They're not able to make that jump.
Why?
I mean, it's the same old thing. How could you mind a child or have a family when the doll is sitting at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday and you have to get back to Galway?
And again, you pointed to Luxembourg and to Italy. How have they managed to get around that? Because that strikes me that what you're looking at there is a problem within the family, where that it is the man failing to pull his weight on the childcare requirements within the family, thereby freeing up the woman. How do you legislate your way around that?
It's different. It comes back to these different benefits. So, for example, we had a lot of talk about government helping with childcare costs. If childcare was more accessible and affordable, then people wouldn't have to make a decision between childcare and career progression. If paternity,
but why, when they do, does it end up being on the woman?
I mean, that's societal norms as well. But also, sometimes it's someone's decision. And I don't want to say that that's the wrong decision. Sometimes people are going to choose that because that's truly what they want. The pay gap isn't about you must do this male-dominated role to equal it out. It's more about you should have the opportunity if that's what you actually want to do.
Well, there's a text here that says, you promote on a person's ability to do a job and go above and beyond. I've had this discussion with plenty of families, and the majority of women want to stay home with their children. They are not forced. Now, as to that, do you get to a position where the pay gap ever eradicates totally? Or will the choices that you're describing that some may want to make mean that it is always present?
I think it's very hard to get to complete equity top to bottom. Really, what you want to get to is that you are making that choice kind of fully and freely. You're not being forced to make that choice because of economic difficulties or because of societal pressures, but that you and your partner can sit down, look at everything and make a decision kind of in the full and free knowledge. And we don't have that right now.
Text say the gender pay gap is a lot higher than 11% at the leadership level. A lot of women do not want the most senior jobs. Some C-level leadership roles will never be family friendly, and most women, certainly not all, will want to work a job that gives them more flexibility. Women can have any job they want. Most just don't want the senior roles where the idea of a 40-hour week or not being available to your company almost all the time is something they want to do. Some women are forced by society to take big roles they don't really want and then feel that they are failing at home and at work. But that is predicated, I infer, on the assumption that those roles of necessity have to be designed that way. Surely it is possible to create a C-suite role that allows anybody of any gender to have some form of work-life balance at the same point.
Absolutely. And this is what it comes back to when I talk about those policies, like, oh, it has to be a 5-day week. Why? Why do we assume that a C-suite role has to be 80 hours a week, taking meetings at 11 p.m, taking meetings at 6 a.m? Why can't that be not the case? And I've worked, admittedly very rarely, but I have worked for companies where there are women in C-suite, and it's very possible. And it's a company that just fosters that policy and sets the example from the top down that work weeks are not 80 hours a week.
Jennifer, thank you. Jennifer Keane, founder of Pay Gap.
The Anton Savage Show on News Talk.
When you walk into O'Brien's Wines, take confidence from the fact that every one of the wines you see on our shelves comes directly from a winemaker we know personally. We choose quality so you can choose what you like. Our exceptional wines start from less than €10. We'll see you in store or online at o'brienswine.ie. O'Brien's, only good choices. Please enjoy alcohol sensibly.